I think you've heard my colleagues speak that we're going to get our money back, and that's just...
Do you really think that's true? I mean, the Stellantis CEO is standing there saying, look how great it is that we're investing all these billions of dollars in America. Well, he doesn't seem to care.
Well, look, I can't speak to what his motivations are.
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. As you all know, Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu, the cow patty, whoever this lady wants to be, whatever face she's going to bring, she never brings the truth. You can see the body language between she and Vasconcelos here in this interview is very off-putting. Vasconcelos is not comfortable with the lies the minister is trying to tell. She holds her to account, does a pretty good job as a journalist in this one. Let's take a look and a listen. Minister Patty Hajdu is a troll. Vasconcelos, what are you going to bring to the table? Looks like you're wearing your journalism hat today. Let's take a peek.
We'll start today with the devastating layoffs in Northern Ontario. Algoma Steel, one of Canada's largest steel producers, is slashing its workforce by a third. The CEO says the layoffs have long been part of the business plan to make the company more competitive with a retooling of plant operations in store. But it comes after the federal and Ontario governments loaned the company $500 million.
How is it the Prime Minister could have been so incompetent to saddle Canadians who can't afford to pay their bills with a $400 million bailout bill without any guarantee of jobs staying in Canada?
I quote the CEO of Algoma Steel that there would be an even darker day if this government hadn't acted.
Exactly.
That loan, that support, saved 2/3 of those jobs.
For more on this story, I spoke with Federal Minister of Jobs, Patty Hajdu. I do want to ask you about the 1,000 layoffs this week issued to take effect in March for workers at the Algoma Steel plant, in Sault Ste. Marie. The CEO of the company, revealed on this program that your government was aware of its business plan that would have entailed 1,000 layoffs prior to loaning the company $400 million. Why are Canadians learning about that from the CEO and not your government?
Well, look, I think there is been full transparency that we're very worried about the tariff impact sectors, including steel. And look, Algoma Steel is one of the longest Canadian-owned companies in our country. They provide steel for a lot of Canadian manufacturers, but they also have as a primary market the United States. And so they've been deeply impacted by the tariffs and really threatened the viability of the company overall. The goal here is to sustain an independent, sovereign steel sector. And look, it's difficult because as we see the changes in the market and the company pivoting to new products, it means that some processes change. It means that there's a delay in orders. It means all kinds of things that the CEO would be better able to talk about. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to save this sector. And I think we went into this eyes wide open, knowing there was going to be disruption, but also determined that we would have a sovereign Canadian steel sector. So that's why the loan, so that the company would have the breathing room and the time to be able to pivot to new product and new market.
And I understand that rationale right now, but I would challenge the assertion that this has been full transparency. For days on end, opposition parties have questioned your government. Were there strings attached to this loan? Did you know that there were going to be these layoffs? And nobody gave an honest answer until they were forced to by the CEO. Given that this is probably the beginning of other sectors getting impacted in the same way, or are you going to take a different approach going forward?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is protect sectors that are deeply integral to our Canadian economy. And I think everybody's been really open that this is a really bumpy time. I mean, look, this is a hinge moment, as the Prime Minister said. As sectors that we rely on, that are the foundation of our sovereignty, are under attack. So if you think about steel, I mean, steel, in order to manufacture and produce at the scale that we want to, whether it's in the military, in military procurement, whether it's major projects, whether it's Build Canada homes, we actually have to protect that industry. And so I think politicians are working together across aisles, across governments, to try to do that essential work. In fact, that was another good example of partnering with Ontario to protect this vital industry. And look, in terms of the layoffs, these are devastating for families. And so early on in the summer, when we saw this kind of potentiality of job loss, wide job loss, whether it was in auto sector or steel or aluminum or forestry, we immediately worked to make sure that there would be protections for layoffs. Because of course, in a in a trade war, that is ultimately the challenge that I think these sectors are facing and families are facing.
I'm sure, though, you've spoken to some of those families and the people who are laid off. They're not looking for EI. That's like they'll need it,
not,
but that's
Ashley,
no. But I'm saying that the argument from your government has been we're ready for this because we've made changes, which are valid changes to make EI more accessible. They're looking for good-paying jobs that do not have, they're able to transition to, and in that way, your government's rhetoric has been incongruent. It's a hinge moment. This is a big deal. The mayor of Sault Ste. Marie says, we've got no details. I can't get anyone from the federal government on the phone to describe how this Build Canada stuff or the Defence Procurement Agency is going to reform things. Like, nothing is happening right now. There's a stasis. How do you explain that incongruency?
Well, look, I think, first of all, I mean, it's not just EI, and I would agree with you. Nobody wants to go in EI, but an EI system that's more responsive, that gives more weeks, that doesn't hold back anything, that people can keep their separation pay and their final payments is actually important changes based on, years of advocacy from a number of different worker groups, including unions, by the way. But it's not just that. It is actually supports for the incredible training that happens across the country, and you talked about pivoting. So there's additional, there's millions of dollars in Ontario, for example, that's being delivered to workers that are experiencing separation, connections immediately to work training, and connections immediately to new opportunities. These are very, very challenging times. I mean, I have experienced it. I think a lot of Canadians have experienced this kind of disruption, and I come from, by the way, an area that's had deep disruption in the pulp and paper industry over the last decade and a half. So that's only part of it, absolutely. But the other piece of it is that we have to protect these industries as well, because ultimately there are still, 1,700 jobs left at Algoma Steel that wouldn't have been there yesterday if the steel mill closed entirely. That mill would not have been able to bring back different forms of production if they lost the workers that they currently have. So this is about saving the furniture, Vashi, in the steel industry. This is about making sure that we have a steel mill in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. And this is about making sure that our companies, our Canadian companies, are well positioned to be able to find new markets and create new products. And that's the purpose behind these loans.
But is that the guiding theory, like save the furniture? Because I think of the President Trump, for example, this week, surrounded by the CEOs of auto companies who were supposed to come to the defense of an integrated sector and instead stand next to him in the Oval Office, essentially, groveling, saying how great he is, how great the tariffs have been. Like, I can only imagine how an auto worker would feel looking at that. Is my best hope that the furniture is saved in the industry? Like, is that enough?
Look, I think we're talking about two very different industries. And in terms of steel, I can tell you that without a sovereign steel industry in Canada, it's going to be very hard to build Canada strong. So there's an effort to make sure that we have a footprint that's Canadian owned. In terms of other international corporations, I think you've heard my colleagues speak that we're going to get our money back. And that's just...
Do you really think that's true? I mean, the Stellantis CEO is standing there saying, look how great it is that we're investing all these billions of dollars in America. He doesn't seem to care.
Well, look, I can't speak to what his motivations are, but I can tell you that we're going to stand up for Canadian dollars, and we're going to go after that money.
Do you think you're actually going to get it? Like, has there been, like, again, this is another case of sort of money that was extended to this company who is basically laughing in our face. Like, it's
egregious. I agree with you. It's egregious.
But what is the evidence that you're actually going to get that money back?
Well, I think
again, we have no transparency other than the industry minister getting up in QP saying it's going to come.
Look, you'll have to ask her the questions because I don't have the details at hand in terms of what litigation they're going to pursue, but that will be our effort. We will make sure that we will do everything in our power to get that money back. But I will go back to Algoma Steel because I think, when we're talking about Canadian companies, whether they're lumber companies, whether they're steel companies, Canadian companies have an important footprint. And we're going to continue to fight for those Canadian companies' viability because without that, it's going to be very hard to build Canada strong. And so I'm actually really pleased with the work that we're doing in terms of supporting those essential industries all across Canada. It's not going to be easy, Vashi, and that's why we have to take care of workers at the same time.
Are you prepared to give Algoma more money if there are more Canadian jobs cut?
Look, I think we need to have those conversations one at a time. Algoma Steel has taken out a loan. They have said that they'll be able to use that money to pivot to new product and to new processes that will allow them to reach new markets and new customers. That remains to be seen. We were just talking about data. We're going to want some evidence of that.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister, a real pleasure. I appreciate it all the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
The federal government is set to face its latest test in the House of Commons this week, courtesy of a planned motion that the Conservatives are hoping to push through.
Mark Carney has got to stop speaking out of both sides of his mouth, stop saying one thing in Alberta and the opposite in British Columbia, and get his Liberal MPs to vote unanimously in favor of approving a pipeline to the Pacific.
The motion was shared by Conservative leader Poilievre online, utilizing similar wording to a memorandum of understanding between Ottawa and the government of Alberta, with both governments agreeing to fast-track a pipeline in Alberta under certain conditions. The planned Conservative motion would determine how much of the Liberal caucus supports the Alberta deal. The motion is expected to be raised on the House floor on Tuesday. Let's bring in Conservative strategist Larissa Whaler. Good morning, Larissa. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Larissa, can you please break down for us what is behind the vote Pierre Poilievre is set to force this week on the new energy deal that the Carney government reached with Alberta?
Yeah, exactly as you said it. The motion on the table coming on Tuesday is designed to make Liberals vote in favor or against it. And the wording of the motion is actually Mark Carney's own words about how he described his commitment to pipelines. And so the Conservatives want to see which members of the Liberal caucus actually support this, because we've seen a lot of disagreement within the Liberal caucus. Remember, the Prime Minister has said he's going to give essentially a veto to the BC Premier over this pipeline, and the BC Premier has said, I don't want it. Now, the sticking issue, it seems, for the BC Premier and much of the BC caucus is this oil tanker ban off the coast of BC. And the ironic part on this one is Canada's government, so the Liberal government, has banned Canadian oil tankers from going up the coast of BC. But U.S. oil tankers can go up the coast of BC. So it is such a competitive disadvantage for us for getting our oil to market. And the Conservatives are basically saying you can't be half pregnant. Either you support pipelines, which means getting rid of the oil tanker ban and frankly overruling the Premier of BC, or you don't. You can't have it both ways. And they think the Liberals are trying to have it both ways right now.
Larissa, what is Carney hoping to see here in terms of votes? How many MPs can he afford to not back his plan? And is Poilievre right in saying it should be unanimous?
So what Poilievre's doing is showing the rest of Canada, but especially Alberta, that this is not a done deal. This is not, the Liberals have changed their tune and they are pro-oil, pro-pipeline. We have the most ethical, clean oil in the world. The Liberals have long been against it. Mark Carney, Premier Hodgson have shown signs that they're kind of in favor of it. But Carney and Hodgson are both not career politicians. They didn't factor in caucus management. That means getting all the Liberals who are elected across the country, especially in urban areas and especially in BC, to support their idea. And the Liberals don't have a majority. So this caucus management is actually very, very important. I think Mark Carney is going to be a little bit uncomfortable because he hasn't placed as much of a priority on caucus management as maybe he should have. And we're going to see who really doesn't support their own Prime Minister's plan.
Let's talk about the significance of the timing here. Why push this motion in the House now?
So the way the legislative calendar works is the Conservatives, the Bloc, the NDP don't because they're not an official party. They get motion days where they can bring forward stuff they want the House to vote on. On Tuesday, the Conservatives have this sort of day, and they decided to make it about pipelines because they saw that you had members like Steve Guilbeault resign from cabinet. You see members of the BC Liberal caucus speak out against this. You have Liberal pundits, like people like me, on TV saying, hey, guys, wait, this pipeline is not a done deal. And that kind of goes contrary to what the Prime Minister wants you to believe. So the Conservatives are actually very smart to sniff them out, to say you can't be half pregnant on pipelines. You're either for it or against it. And the Conservatives have been pro-pipeline for decades.
Okay, thank you so much, Larissa. That is Larissa Whaler, Conservative strategist.
We'll wrap it up right there, gang. Aaron, Canadian Looney, we cover Canadian federal politics right here. Come and learn about Canadian federal politics. That's what I'm doing, trying to share that with you. We'll catch you in the next video. Don't trust the legacy media. Filter it. Watch it like you've got to. But see what they are selling, because they are trying to sell you something. It's not the truth. Ciao for now. Thank you for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one. Hit the like, smash subscribe. Catch you in the next one.
Anytime you hear Mark Carney talking about trade with the US or tariffs on Canadian exports, you should just say, who cares, change the channel, and tune him out, because that was his message to you. So you know what, Mark Carney, this part's especially for you. On behalf of the millions of Canadians you've let down and insulted, every time you open your mouth in Parliament, our message to you, who cares?